Hello, my name is Jouni Vilkka and I am a teacher from Finland, and this video is part of a series based on texts I wrote as a student at various universities. And in fact this video is the first one where I actually look at one of the actual papers. It's not exactly an essay, but a presentation for a philosophy seminar. Basically the same as an essay. In this video I first explain the structure of the paper and therefore also this video, and then I will get into the meat of the substance, if you will. The title of this paper is The Definition of and Motivation for Atheism. I begin with the first part, the definition of atheism, where I first have to define theism and then atheism, and I also have something to say about agnosticism. After that, I begin the part of the motivation for atheism, the most important motivations anyway, as I see them. And that part is composed of 4 subsections. So 4 types of reasons for atheism. And the first of these is a group of epistemological or rational reasons based on rationality. The second is a bunch of reasons from naturalism, essentially the sciences. And there are a lot of reasons in general to doubt the veracity of theism, so that forms the third group. And finally, there are also many harms caused by religion, and I only briefly touch on those. So let's get to it. So first we have to start with defining theism, because atheism is a word derived from theism, or rather it contains the whole term theism and a negating term, a prefix a in the beginning of the word. Interestingly, in recent years I've noticed that in comparative religion the term theism is being used actually in the sense of monotheism. So to me that is actually curious and misleading way of understanding the term theism. For me, theism is the top category of various forms of theism, including monotheism, the belief in one god; polytheism, the belief in several gods; pantheism, the belief that all of existence is God; and panentheism, which is the view that not only is the whole world God, but God also is something beyond the world. Also, there may be other types of theism, but as you may have noticed by now, the general theme here is that theism, in its many forms anyway, is about belief in at least one God. So in comparative religion these days, apparently people use the term theism to refer only to the belief in one God, but that is kind of strange, and I do not accept that definition. While atheism is simply the negation of theism, it still also contains many different variations, or at least some variations within it. Most importantly, the distinction between negative atheism and positive atheism, where negative atheism means simply the absence of belief and nothing more really. The form of positive atheism goes further and actually is a belief that God does not exist. So there's a huge difference there. And it is the negative form of atheism that is the typical, the usual, and the rational basis of all types of atheism. Of course, there would be no atheism at all if there hadn't been theists first, because while the burden of proof always lies on the claimant, someone claiming that some kind of God exists, so a negative atheist is anyone who simply hasn't heard about the entity that is being claimed to exist, for example, anyone who hasn't formed any kind of belief regarding that entity is a negative atheist. But someone who goes further and claims that that entity does not exist is also making a positive claim, and therefore they also have to justify that belief. But if no one had ever made the claim in the first place, if no one had ever said that God exists, then there would be no need for positive atheism either, because obviously there would be no claim to argue against. So the important thing is to realize that atheism is always an answer to the question, do you believe in God, or do you believe in the existence of God? And only that sort of begins the discussion. So beyond the two definitions of atheism I gave, negative and positive types of atheism, in the paper I also define two other forms of atheism, or rather these are applications of the term atheism. So the general atheism and particular, or perhaps I should say special atheism. So these are almost useless terms, I suppose, but the point is that you can only be negative atheism about all forms of theism in general. All the forms of positive atheism are more particular. They are always about a specific definition of God, or at least it has to be some kind of perhaps a broad, perhaps slightly or even very vague definition of God, but there has to be something that you can grasp and then argue against. So while you can be a negative atheist about all forms of all definitions of God, it's not rational to be a positive atheist about all possible definitions of God. I could, for example, prove that God exists as certainly as I exist. It simply is a matter of definition. If I define that I am God, then if you believe that I exist, now you therefore have to believe that God exists. So you couldn't say before this definition, that before hearing this definition, that there are no gods of any kind, because it's all about definitions. So of course there's no reason for anyone to accept just any definition. But if you are going to say that there are no gods, then you also have to define what you mean by God. So now you are defining God. And there are likely to be many other definitions of God, many descriptions of God, that also many of them have to contradict your definition. But the important thing is that while there's theism in its many forms and atheism in at least some different forms, the level of distinction, the dichotomy here is that of theism in all its forms and atheism. So atheism negates all of the types of theism. It's simply usually the absence of any kind of belief in any God. It's absence. And this also means that there is no burden of proof for negative atheism, because it is not making any positive claims. Anyone who makes a claim about God or anything else really bears the burden of proof. It's up to them to start the discussion by giving some kind of definition or description of what it is they are talking about. Otherwise there can be no rational discussion. I also want to say a couple of words about agnosticism, because like atheism, agnosticism is also a negative term in that it's a negation of something. In this case, Gnosticism, which is a kind of religious type of belief that agnostic claims to have access to knowledge about God. Or you could broaden it and claim that you have some kind of objective knowledge. So agnosticism is a similar term to skepticism. It's a view about the limits of knowledge. But in this case, it is really about knowledge of supernatural entities, or at least God. So an agnostic simply accepts the limitations of knowledge and knows and accepts that they do not have any knowledge about such things, entities as God. This is obviously a very different definition of agnosticism than the one in my experience is usually presented by people like proselytizers of religious, mainly Christian beliefs, because these people are trying to present agnosticism as a kind of a reasonable middle ground between theism and atheism. So agnosticism is supposed to be something in the middle there. And this is a part of their rhetoric where they define atheism as the belief that God does not exist, and then claim that, well, that kind of belief or claim that God does not exist is not exactly rational or defensible in their opinion. Then there's a more moderate stance, that of agnosticism, and they are trying to present this to their opponents or to people who are not so eager to accept theism. So I think this is a trick, a rhetorical trick, where they are trying to present agnosticism as this halfway point, so that they would then perhaps later on find it easier to convince this agnostic to accept theism, and it would make the stance of atheism seem more unreasonable and unpopular. So it's about rhetoric, and it is kind of dishonest in my view. If we look at agnosticism the way that I have here described it, and the way the word actually has been used originally, it really is not an answer to the question, do you believe in God? It's an answer to the question, can you access knowledge about God? Or can you have knowledge about God? So it's an answer to a different question. And this means that agnostics, generally speaking, are actually negative atheists, because most likely, if you believe in God, you know that you believe in God. And if you don't believe in God, then you also probably know that you don't believe in God. So when asked, do you believe in God, you should be able to answer yes or no. Do I have some kind of belief in some kind of God or not? Of course, you do not know whether God exists or not, perhaps, but that is not what is being asked. If someone asks you, can you prove that God exists or not, then you might say that no, you can't, that you're agnostic, you don't believe that it's possible to prove the existence of God, or something like that. There are some agnostic theists as well, people who believe that it is not possible to know whether God exists or not, but they still believe in the existence of God for other reasons. Or they have perhaps some personal reason to believe that perhaps they themselves are justified in believing in God, but they don't believe that it's possible to prove to others that God exists. I suppose that could be also some form of agnosticism. The main point in this section has been that atheism is always an answer to the question, do you believe in God? The answer is always negative for atheists, so they do not believe in the existence of God. In this next section, I'm going to go over what I consider to be the most important reasons, the most common reasons to identify as an atheist, to not believe in the existence of God. And there may be many other reasons as well. The first group of motivations for atheism is, in my view, the most important, actually, for me, perhaps not for everyone. And these are epistemic reasons. They are based on epistemology and rationality. And W.K. Clifford wrote about the ethics of belief, and that is also something that I pretty much accept, that forming beliefs is not just an epistemic matter, but it is also an ethical matter. So the ideal is to only believe what it is justified to believe. So we should not just believe any claim that we come across, that we hear somewhere, or come up with ourselves. Instead, we should strive to only believe things that we have justification for, that we have reasons to believe that thing, that claim, whatever. The burden of proof, as I mentioned in the previous section, is always with the person making the positive claim. Otherwise, we would find ourselves in a really strange situation, because we have potentially an unlimited number of various claims available to us, and we cannot go over every single possible claim and figure out if it's true or not. First, whoever thinks that something is justified to believe in, it is up to them to show that there are these reasons why it's okay to believe that thing, and after that we can all basically do our best to assess the evidence and the arguments provided. And of course, if we find it interesting, we may come up with our own reasons. In that situation, we are the ones with the burden of proof. Our minds have limitations, and we cannot either believe all possible claims simply because we do not have enough capacity in our minds to believe all things, and obviously a huge number of those beliefs would be in contradiction with each other. Also, I think it's a value in itself to be rational, and truth certainly is an important thing in and of itself. So perhaps not everyone will be convinced of these views, but certainly I would find it very strange if a philosopher could possibly think that it is not important whether one's beliefs are true or not, or whether one's beliefs are in contradiction with each other, or whether they cohere with each other. In my view, I certainly myself, in my opinion, all philosophers and possibly everyone has a duty to seek the truth and avoid falsehoods. I certainly take that as my own duty. But it's up to every individual, I suppose, to make their own decisions about these ethical matters. Certainly, I do not see any reason why I should respect a person who does not care whether something is true or not. That view is simply not a very respectable one. The second group of motivations for atheism comes from naturalism, which is the view that science is the best method for seeking knowledge about the world, and nothing in scientific knowledge points to the existence of anything supernatural or entities like God as usually described. So in the scientific worldview, there simply is nothing like God. So why should anyone believe that something like God exists? When science, if that ever happens, discovers God, then fine, okay, we can accept that God exists. That's basically how all naturalists think. And this is probably the most important reason why at present most atheists are atheists, because apparently nothing in the scientific worldview points toward the existence of God. In the past, people have mistakenly thought that there are things in nature, for example, such as the apparent structure or order in nature. They thought that it points toward the existence of a creator, but science has proved otherwise. There are many claims made by religions or religious people that have been actually basically proven false by the advance of science. There are always these God of the gaps arguments, but the problem with those arguments, that is, arguments of the type that science cannot explain this one thing, therefore God did it. This type of argument is actually very bad for religion, because as science progresses and proves these claims over and over to be false, then this reduces the space left for God, and the whole progress of diminishing this area where there's still some room for God itself kind of makes the whole belief in theism seem implausible. It should be noted that naturalism is not the view that science or the scientific world view or scientific knowledge are absolute truths, that science gives us a kind of naive, simple truth. Rather, the point of naturalism is that science is simply the best method, but it doesn't mean that it's a perfect method or that it actually is able to give us knowledge of everything. It is also possible that our limitations just condemn us to ignorance about a lot of things, and we will never know everything. We just have to accept that. The third group of motivations for atheism is actually a group of reasons to doubt the truth of theism. This, for the most part, is based on sort of historical arguments, both from a broader historical point of view, the history of religions, which shows that all religions have evolved over time. They have been perhaps invented at some point, often by copying earlier religions, and they also have evolved over time. These particular religions have developed new interpretations of religion over time. So the views of any religious person at this present moment are probably very different to many beliefs of a person who is from the same religious tradition from previous generations. Often also what is considered to be the true form of religion may actually be extremely new, and people do not realize that their old ways may actually have been new to just the previous generation. This has happened various times, several times. Also, the individual believer has a history of that belief, and that also may be reason to doubt the claims of that religion, simply because that person may have psychological reasons, social reasons to believe that their religion is true. Quite obviously, the most typical example is that basically nearly all people who are religious in one way or another have adopted their religion at an early age from their surroundings, from their family, most importantly, and also from their peers, the culture they live in. Surprisingly, the religion you were brought up with is the one and true religion. It's unlikely. So this kind of historical reasons are reasons to doubt the truth of religion, any type of theism, for example, or any other religion actually as well. There are also plausible explanations for religions, for the existence of religions from religious studies, as that field is called. For example, cognitive science has come up with some, in my opinion, very plausible reasons why people are likely to form religious beliefs. This also means that since these explanations of the existence and type of religious beliefs do not actually require the existence of any supernatural entities or any gods or anything like that, but rather just from natural reasons explain why there are such things as religions. It also provides a reason to doubt the existence of any of these entities that religions talk about. Religions have also been used over and over again throughout history to control people, to oppress people even, but mostly to control people, and especially as a form of social cohesion, creating ideology. And also this does not require the truth of any of the claims of the religion. Simply the existence of that ideology is enough. It doesn't require anything more. So this in itself is kind of a reason to doubt the truth of the claims of that ideology. People have spent a lot of resources and especially time to basically prove the existence of God, or to provide justification for belief in God over a couple of millennia now, without success. So that in itself is a rather good historical reason to doubt the truth of any religion, really, certainly of theism, because the simplest explanation for why they have failed for so long is that it's difficult to prove that something that is false is true. There are and have always been numerous religions. There have been thousands of different gods that people have talked about. And it simply is obvious that because all these religions tend to contradict each other, they cannot all be true, but they can all be false. The fourth group of motivations for atheism is actually a really big list, I suppose, of the harms caused by religions, and there is other unjustified, irrational beliefs. We could talk about the Crusades or religious terrorism, all kinds of religious extremism, the views of, for example, the Catholic Church regarding things like contraception and abortion, which are really harmful views, especially for the people who actually have to suffer and in many cases die because of these views. There are many reasons that could be listed in this category, but I think those are so numerous that they should be in a video of their own. For me personally, simply the worst type of harm, in a way, simply believing something that is false and making those beliefs very widespread is a huge harm. It is our duty as rational, or at least potentially rational beings, to seek the truth, and religions are causing huge harm in misleading us from that path. So these were the 4 biggest groups of motivations for atheism, as I can see, and this has been the motivation of and the definition for, or rather definition of and motivation for atheism. I will put a link to the text in the description below in case you want to read it, although it is in Finnish. It does have a list of sources you might perhaps benefit from. And also I will put a link below to my page for this channel, so you can check out what my plans for the future are. So, bye for now.